The grand hall of the Zerath Empire shone with golden light. Tall pillars stretched toward a ceiling carved with glowing symbols of the stars. Delegates from many worlds filled the room, dressed in bright robes, armor, or strange forms that shimmered like liquid. This was a gathering of leaders, soldiers, and thinkers from across the galaxy. Everyone had come to witness the next generation of Zerath royalty step forward. Among the honored guests stood Princess Mira. She was young, smaller than her siblings, with silver-blue skin and eyes that seemed to hold the quiet of deep oceans. She wore a thin crown of crystal, but she did not walk with the same boldness as her brothers and sisters. Instead, Mira stood at the edge of the hall near one of the tall pillars, her gaze lowered to the shining floor. The hall echoed with voices. Many spoke of treaties, trade, and the power of fleets. Some praised the strength of the crown prince, while others admired the confidence of the eldest daughter. When their eyes turned to Mira, their expressions shifted. Some smiled politely and moved on. Others did not look at her at all. Whispers spread that she was too quiet, too soft, not fit for the Empire's future. Mira heard them, but she did not answer. She never raised her voice in crowded halls, and her silence only gave strength to the rumors. She was known as the shy princess, the one ignored even in her own family's court. Yet behind her silence, her mind was sharp, and her heart longed for someone to see her, not as a shadow, but as herself. Among the many visitors was a small group of humans. Humanity was new to the great councils of the stars. Their ships were not as large, and their worlds were still few, but their curiosity had brought them far. They walked with wide eyes, taking in the sight of species they had only read about in transmissions. Most of the hall barely noticed them, for the Zerath were old and proud, and humans were seen as young and untested. One of these humans was Daniel. He was not a soldier or a diplomat, but an engineer, who had joined the delegation to study alien machines. His clothes were simple, his manner calm, and he felt both wonder and unease in the vast hall. The voices around him spoke in many tones, but he noticed quickly how often one figure was left alone. Near the edge of the hall, under the glow of the crystal lights, the princess stood in silence. Daniel watched her for a moment. She was surrounded by beauty and power, yet no one came near her. Her siblings laughed and spoke loudly, surrounded by admirers, but she remained a quiet shadow. Something about the way her hands folded, the way her eyes avoided the crowd, stirred something in him. He had seen that look before, not in palaces, but in classrooms back on Earth, when a shy student sat alone while others gathered in groups. Daniel felt a pull. He did not know if it was right to approach a princess, but his heart told him she looked lonely. So while others chased after the crown prince and eldest daughter, Daniel walked across the shining floor toward the silent one. Mira sensed movement near her and lifted her eyes slightly. She expected another guest to pass by without a word, as always, but instead she saw a human stopping a short distance away, looking at her with no judgment, only quiet respect. "Hello," Daniel said gently. His voice was not loud, but it carried warmth. Mira blinked, caught by surprise. Few greeted her directly, and never with such simple honesty. She gave a small nod, unsure of what to say. "I am Daniel," he continued, his words steady. "I came here with the human delegation. This place is amazing, but it feels very large, does it not?" Her lips parted slightly. It was such a plain question, so different from the grand speeches and polished greetings she usually heard. For a moment she hesitated, but then she answered softly, "Yes, it is very large." Her voice was gentle, like the faint sound of water in a quiet cave. Daniel smiled, encouraged by her reply. "Do you like being here?" he asked. Mira lowered her gaze again, her fingers curling around the edge of her robe. "I am here because I must be. Many eyes are watching. I do not enjoy the noise." Daniel nodded, understanding at once. "Neither do I. Crowds make me feel small. Back home, I like working with machines because they do not talk too much. They are easier to understand than people." Mira looked at him again, truly looked this time. His words were simple, yet they touched something inside her. No one else had ever spoken to her like that, as if she were not a princess, but just another person who might feel the same things. The silence between them was not heavy. It was calm. Mira felt for the first time in such a hall that she was not trapped by the noise. Daniel did not push her to speak more. He stood near, giving her space, and waited. Slowly, Mira found herself curious. "Why did you come to me?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. He met her eyes and answered plainly, Because you looked like you needed someone to talk to. Her chest tightened at the honesty. So many others looked past her, but this one human, unknown and ordinary, had noticed. A voice rang from the center of the hall, calling the guests to attention. The speeches of the elders began, filled with talk of power, duty, and alliances. Delegates gathered closer, leaving Mira once again on the edge. But now she did not feel completely unseen. One person remained by her side. As the speeches continued, Mira spoke quietly to Daniel, telling him about the carvings on the ceiling, each one a story of her people's past. Daniel listened with interest, asking questions not to flatter but to learn. He spoke in return of Earth's oceans and mountains, painting pictures of blue skies and green forests. Mira's eyes softened as she listened, the images filling her mind with wonders beyond her empire's halls. When the gathering ended, the great crowd moved out, following the royal heirs and foreign leaders. Mira lingered, uncertain as always if she should stay or go. For a moment, the old weight of loneliness pressed on her again. Then Daniel extended his hand. He did not bow or kneel, only offered it openly as one might to a friend. Mira stared at it, her thoughts tangled. No one had ever done this before. To take his hand in front of others would be bold. To refuse would be easy, as silence always was. Her heart beat faster. Then with quiet courage she lifted her own hand and placed it in his. The warmth of his touch was steady, not demanding, not false. It was simple human kindness. For Mira, it was the beginning of something greater than she had ever known. The sun of Zirath Prime rose high above the palace, sending rays of pale gold through its crystal windows. The grand hall was quiet now, emptied of the cheering voices from the night before, but in Mira's memory one moment still remained bright. The human named Daniel had held out his hand and she had taken it. It was a small gesture, yet to her it was like a door had opened. For the first time, she had not been invisible. The following morning, Mira walked the palace gardens, where the air smelled of soft flowers, and the ground glowed faintly with embedded lights. The tall trees stretched like silver towers, and their leaves swayed in rhythm with the breeze. She often came here when the palace walls pressed too tightly around her. Yet today her steps were lighter. She thought about the human's calm voice and how he had spoken without pretending. As she paused near a fountain shaped like a star, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Daniel approaching.
He did not wear the fine robes of other guests, but simple clothes suited for work.
A light bag hung across his shoulder, and his eyes scanned the garden with curiosity. "Good morning, Princess Mira," he said with a small nod. Mira felt a shy smile touch her lips. "Good morning, Daniel." "You found the gardens?" I asked one of the guards, he replied. They looked at me as if I should not bother, but they showed the way. "I hoped you might be here." Mira's hands folded in front of her, a habit she never broke. "You wish to see me again?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "I enjoyed speaking with you yesterday. I thought perhaps you would not mind if I joined you." Mira's heart lifted at his honesty. She gestured to the path beside her. "You may." Together they walked among the trees. Daniel asked about the glowing flowers, and Mira told him how they fed on light and released energy back into the air at night. He bent down to look closely at the petals, amazed by their shifting colors. Mira spoke softly but with growing ease, sharing knowledge she had kept hidden before. After a while, Daniel asked, "Do you always stay apart from the others?" Mira hesitated. Few had dared to ask her such a direct question. "Yes," she admitted. "The others are louder. They are stronger. I do not speak as they do. When I try, my words feel small." Daniel nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I know that feeling. When I was young, I was quiet too. Others thought I had little to say, but I found that if I listened, I learned more than most of them." Mira turned her head, studying him. "And now? Do you still feel quiet?" He smiled. "Not in the same way. I learned that even a quiet voice can matter when spoken at the right time. Machines taught me that. A small sound can tell you when a great engine is failing. If you ignore it, the whole system breaks." Mira's eyes widened slightly. The idea touched her deeply. She had often wondered if her silence was weakness, but his words suggested it could be something else. Their walk continued, and Mira found herself speaking of things she never shared with others. She told Daniel how her older brother, the crown prince, always drew the attention of visitors with bold speeches, while her eldest sister was praised for her commanding presence. Mira, however, was left to stand in the shadows. "They shine like stars," she said, her voice low, "and I am only the faint light no one sees." Daniel shook his head gently. "I saw you yesterday. Not your crown or your robes, but you. Do you know what I noticed first?" Mira blinked. "What?" "The way you watched the hall," he said. "You did not look lost. You looked as if you were listening to every word. That is not weakness. That is strength." Her heart beat faster at his words. No one had ever said such a thing to her before. She looked away, feeling warmth rise in her cheeks, but inside she carried his words like a treasure. As they reached the edge of the garden, a group of foreign delegates passed by. They bowed deeply to Mira, but then hurried on without another word. Mira lowered her gaze, used to the pattern. Yet Daniel stayed beside her unbothered. When the others were gone, he said, "They do not see you because they are blinded by noise and pride. But I see you. I think if you chose to speak, they would all hear you. They just do not know it yet." Mira's hands tightened around each other. "It is not easy to speak. I fear the moment I try, they will laugh." Daniel looked at her steadily. "Then speak first to me. I will never laugh." The promise in his tone settled deep inside her. She felt a fragile courage begin to grow. Later that evening, Mira returned to the hall with her family. More guests had gathered, and the noise of voices filled the air once more. Mira stood in her usual place near the side, but this time Daniel was among the humans, watching her from across the chamber. When their eyes met, he gave her the smallest of nods, as if reminding her of his promise. The council leader spoke about trade between worlds, but a problem arose when two delegations disagreed about routes through shared space. Their voices rose in argument, and the hall grew tense. Mira listened carefully, her sharp mind catching details others missed. She realized the solution was simple if one group adjusted its timing by a single rotation. Her lips parted. She thought of Daniel's words. "A small sound can matter. A quiet voice can be heard." For a long moment, she stood frozen. Her hands trembled, but then she saw Daniel's calm gaze on her. With a breath of courage, she stepped forward. "My lords," she said softly. Her voice was not loud, but the hall hushed at the surprise of her speaking. "If the vessels from Terran depart 2 days later, the path will be clear for the Zerath convoys. Both may travel without conflict." The chamber fell into silence. Delegates turned their heads toward her. The leaders considered her suggestion. After a pause, one of them nodded slowly. "It is true," he admitted. "Such a change would solve the matter." The argument ended at once. The council moved forward. Mira stepped back, her heart pounding, hardly believing she had spoken aloud. Yet no one laughed. Instead, she saw a few curious eyes on her, eyes that had never noticed her before. Across the hall, Daniel smiled. He raised his hand slightly, not waving, but as if to say, "I told you so." Mira lowered her gaze, but a small smile touched her lips. That night, as the stars shone above the palace, Mira sat by her window. The city stretched below, its lights glowing like a field of fireflies. She thought about the day, about the moment she had spoken, and about the human who had believed in her when no one else did. Her hand lifted slowly, touching the glass where the stars shone. She remembered the warmth of his hand in hers and wondered what new paths might open now that she had taken the first step. For the first time in her life, Mira did not feel invisible. She felt seen, and that changed everything. The next morning came with a soft glow across the palace towers. Mira sat in her private chamber, her thoughts still resting on what had happened the night before. She had spoken during the council, and they had listened. The memory filled her with both pride and unease. Pride because her words had carried weight. Unease because she feared it might have been only chance. She looked at her reflection in the polished mirror of crystal. The crown sat on her head, light as air yet heavy in meaning. She whispered to herself, was it real, or did they only hear because it was new? Her quiet was broken by a gentle knock at her door. Mira straightened. Few visited her rooms. When the door opened, Daniel stood there, holding a small case of tools at his side. "Good morning, Princess," he said with an easy smile. Mira felt the corners of her lips lift. "Good morning, Daniel. Why do you carry tools? You are not here to repair my room, are you?" He laughed softly. "No, I was asked to examine one of the palace machines. But before I begin, I thought perhaps I could see you. I wanted to say I was proud of you yesterday." Her heart warmed at his words. She lowered her gaze and murmured, "I was afraid. But you said a small sound can matter. And it did, Daniel said firmly. You saw what no one else saw. That is not chance. That is who you are. Mira looked up into his steady eyes and felt courage stir again. Later that day, Mira and Daniel walked together into the great library of the palace. It was a place Mira loved but rarely shared with anyone. Tall shelves of glowing tablets rose like walls of knowledge, and the floor shimmered with lines of light guiding readers to different sections. This is my quiet world, Mira said softly. Here no one demands speeches. Only learning. Daniel ran his fingers along the glowing shelves. It is beautiful. What do you study here? History, strategies, the laws of the stars, Mira replied. But I do not speak of them, because no one wishes to hear from me. Daniel shook his head. Then they are foolish. Show me what you know. Mira hesitated, but his tone carried no doubt. She guided him to a table, pulling out a tablet that held maps of trade routes across the galaxy. She explained how certain paths were stronger, how fleets could move without conflict if leaders adjusted their plans. As she spoke, her voice grew steady, her eyes bright. Daniel listened with complete attention. He asked questions not to test her but to learn. For Mira, it was the first time someone outside her tutors valued her knowledge. She realized how much she carried within her, hidden under silence. At one point, Daniel leaned back and said, You understand more than half the leaders I have met. You see the pattern while they fight over details. If they gave you the chance, you could guide them all. Mira looked down at her hands, but they will not listen. Daniel reached across the table, not touching her but placing his hand near hers. Then let them see you through me. When you speak to me, your voice is clear. If you speak to them with the same heart, they will hear, even if it takes time. Mira's eyes softened. She thought about his words all day. That evening, the council gathered again, and another problem arose. A debate broke out about resource sharing between two allied worlds. Voices rose high, each side unwilling to give ground. Mira listened carefully, her sharp mind tracing the root of the conflict. She saw the flaw in their arguments, a hidden detail neither side noticed. Her pulse quickened. Should she speak again? What if this time they dismissed her? She glanced toward the human's corner. Daniel was watching her, calm and patient. His expression carried no pressure, only trust. Taking a steady breath, Mira stepped forward once more. Her voice rose clear, though gentle. You argue over division because you count by weight, but the resources should be measured by energy yield. If measured correctly, both sides gain equal benefit, and the trade will not collapse. Silence filled the hall. Delegates turned to her. One leader checked the figures on a tablet, then nodded in shock. She is correct. The yield is equal if counted this way. The argument dissolved, replaced by murmurs of surprise. Mira stepped back, her chest rising and falling quickly. She felt the heavy gaze of many eyes, but this time it was not dismissal. It was attention. That night, Mira sat alone by her balcony looking at the stars. Her thoughts whirled. She had spoken twice now, and both times she had been right. She began to wonder if her quiet voice could indeed carry power. A knock came again. Daniel entered carrying 2 cups of warm drink from the human quarters. He offered one to her. On Earth we drink this to calm the mind, he explained. Mira accepted the cup, tasting the simple flavor. She found it soothing. Together they sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights below. Finally, Daniel said, Do you see it now? Your voice matters. You are not a shadow. You are a guide. Mira turned to him, her eyes soft but firm. I begin to see. But without you, I would still stand in silence. Daniel shook his head. You always had the strength. I only reminded you. The words touched her deeply. She did not reply at once. Instead, she let the warmth of his presence fill the quiet. In the days that followed, Mira and Daniel spent more time together. She showed him parts of the palace few humans had seen, and he told her stories of Earth's seas, forests, and mountains. She listened with wonder, painting the images in her mind. In return, she shared with him the hidden wisdom of her people, the lessons of the Zerath stars. Each day, Mira grew less afraid to speak. Each day, Daniel saw more of the strength she carried, and slowly the galaxy began to notice the princess who had once been invisible. The palace of the Zerath Empire stood bright against the sky, but beneath its shining walls shadows had begun to gather. The council meetings had continued for several days, and Mira's voice was now known. Twice she had spoken, and twice her quiet wisdom had calmed great disputes. Delegates who once ignored her now glanced at her with new eyes. some with respect, others with curiosity, and a few with suspicion. Mira felt the change but did not let it swell her pride. Instead, she felt a weight of caution. She had stepped into the light, but light always casts shadows. One afternoon, as Mira walked through the lower corridors of the palace, she passed two foreign attendants who whispered quickly in a tongue they thought she could not understand. But Mira's studies in the library had given her knowledge of many languages. She slowed her steps and listened. "The strike is set for the council chamber," one said. "When the leaders gather, the machines will break open. The empire will fall into shame and the rivals will take the lead." Mira's heart froze. The attendants hurried away, unaware she had understood. She stood still, her mind racing. Someone planned to sabotage the council itself. She wanted to run to the guards, but she remembered how often her warnings had been dismissed in the past. Even now, with her new respect, many still saw her as the shy princess. They might not believe her, but there was one who would. That evening, she found Daniel in the human quarters. He was repairing a small device, his hand steady as always. When he saw her, he set it aside at once. "Mira," he said, noticing her pale face. "What has happened?" She told him everything she had heard. Her words came fast but clear. Daniel listened without doubt. When she finished, he said firmly, "I believe you. We must act before it is too late." Relief washed over her. "But how?" "If we speak without proof, they will ignore us." Daniel thought for a moment. "Then we find the proof. Machines leave traces. If sabotage is planned, the council chamber will show signs. Let us search before the meeting tomorrow." Mira nodded. Together, they moved quietly through the palace that night. The corridors were lit with faint light from crystal lamps, and guards stood at the main doors. But Mira knew hidden ways. Path's servants used to bring supplies. With her guidance, they slipped inside the chamber when no one watched. The great hall was silent, its empty seats waiting for the leaders of many worlds. Mira's steps echoed softly as she walked among them, her eyes scanning every corner. Daniel bent down near the control panels, his hands moving with skill. After some time, he frowned. "Look here," he whispered. Mira knelt beside him. He pointed to thin wires hidden behind the panel, not part of the usual design. "Explosive charges," he explained. "Small, but enough to break the chamber wide open. The attackers want chaos, not victory." Mira's breath caught. "Can you disarm them?" "I can," Daniel said, "but if I am seen, they will accuse humans of planting them." "We need witnesses," Mira straightened. "Then tomorrow, during the gathering, I will reveal it. They may not trust me alone, but if I speak with calm and certainty and you show the proof, they will believe." Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. "It is dangerous. The ones who planted this may act when they realize you know." Mira lifted her chin, her shyness replaced with resolve. "Then let them see I am not afraid." The next day, the council chamber filled with voices once again. Delegates gathered, unaware of the danger around them. Mira sat quietly at her place, her hands folded, her heart beating fast. Daniel stood among the humans, ready but calm. When the speeches began, Mira rose. Her voice cut through the noise, steady though soft. "Honored leaders, before you continue, there is something you must know. This chamber has been prepared for sabotage. I have seen it with my own eyes." A wave of shock moved through the hall. Some scoffed, others frowned. One elder said, "Child, such claims cannot be made without proof." Daniel stepped forward. "The princess speaks the truth. I found hidden charges in the panels. They are here now. I can show you." The guards moved quickly to check. When they uncovered the wires, the chamber erupted in shouts. Delegates leapt to their feet. Panic spread as some feared the devices might explode at once. At that moment, a sharp noise rang through the hall. Panels on the ceiling split open and armed drones dropped down, their red eyes glowing. The saboteurs had triggered the second part of their plan. Screams filled the chamber. Guards rushed to draw weapons. Mira stood frozen for one heartbeat, then her mind snapped into focus. She raised her voice louder than ever before. "Do not scatter. Form a shield wall at the front. Keep the leaders behind the pillars. Drones are fast but weak to focused fire." The guards obeyed without question, surprised by her command but recognizing the wisdom in it. Daniel ran to her side, pulling her back from the line of fire while covering her with his own body. Blasts lit the chamber, echoing off the walls. Mira's eyes darted across the scene, calculating. "Daniel, the control hub is in the ceiling, above the central seat. If it is destroyed, the drones will fall." Daniel nodded. "Then I will reach it." "No," Mira said, her voice firm. "We will reach it together." They moved along the edge of the chamber, using the pillars for cover. The air burned with heat from laser fire. Drones swooped low, firing at the guards. Mira guided Daniel with sharp instructions, her quiet mind now a voice of command. At last they reached the central seat. Daniel climbed swiftly, his engineer's hands steady even under fire. Mira kept her eyes on the drones, calling warnings whenever one turned toward him. With a sharp pull, Daniel ripped free the hub's core. Sparks showered the hall, and at once the drones froze, their lights dimming before they crashed to the ground. Silence filled the chamber. Smoke rose, and the smell of burning wires drifted through the air. Slowly, the leaders lifted their heads. Their eyes turned to Mira, who still stood tall despite the chaos. It was the shy princess who had warned them, who had guided the defense, who had helped save them all. One elder bowed his head. "Princess Mira, your voice has saved this council." "We owe you our lives," the others murmured in agreement. For the first time, Mira did not lower her gaze. She stood steady, her heart still racing, but her eyes clear. Daniel came to stand beside her, his face marked with soot, but his smile calm. Mira looked at him, and in that moment she knew her quiet life had changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, she was heard, and she was strong. The smoke from the broken drone still hung in the chamber long after the last sparks had faded. Guards cleared the wreckage, leaders whispered among themselves, and every eye returned again and again to the young princess who had stood in silence for so many years. Mira remained near the central seat, her crown glinting faintly in the dim light. Her heart was heavy with the rush of battle, but her face was calm. She had spoken when it mattered, she had guided when chaos threatened to consume them, and she had been heard. Daniel stood close to her, his clothes marked by dust and scorch marks, his tool case hanging at his side. He had risked his life without question, and Mira knew that without him the council would have fallen. The eldest counselor, a being of great age with a voice like stone, rose from his seat. "Princess Mira," he said, his tone carrying through the silent hall. "You warned us. You saved us. The Empire owes you its gratitude." Mira bowed her head, not out of fear but respect. "I did only what I must. The danger was clear, and I could not remain silent." The counselor nodded slowly. "You have shown wisdom beyond years and courage beyond doubt. From this day no voice shall call you invisible." The delegates murmured their agreement. Mira felt their eyes differently now, not pity, not dismissal, but respect. It was heavy, yet it felt right. After the council ended, Mira and Daniel walked side by side through the long corridors of the palace. The walls glowed with soft crystal light, and the echo of their steps filled the air. For once, Mira did not lower her gaze to the floor. She walked tall, though her fingers trembled slightly from the weight of what had happened. Daniel glanced at her. "You were incredible," he said gently. Mira gave him a small smile. "I was afraid. But when I saw you, I remembered your promise. You said my voice would matter." "You were right." He shook his head. "You were always right. I only reminded you." Her smile deepened, fragile but real. In the days that followed, word spread quickly across the galaxy. The shy princess who had once been ignored had saved the council itself. Messages of respect arrived from distant worlds. Delegates requested her thoughts in private meetings. Guards bowed lower than before. Even her older siblings, who had always overshadowed her, looked at her now with a mix of surprise and caution. Mira did not boast. She did not raise her voice higher than needed. Instead, she chose her words carefully, offering guidance only when it was needed most. And each time she spoke, leaders leaned closer to listen. One evening, as the stars lit the sky above Zerath Prime, Mira stood on her balcony. The city stretched out like a field of light. She thought of her childhood when she had sat alone in crowded rooms, invisible even among her own kin. She thought of the whispers that had followed her steps, whispers that called her weak, soft, and unworthy. And she thought of the moment Daniel had held out his hand. That single gesture had been like a spark in the dark. It had lit a path she had never dared to walk. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Daniel stepped onto the balcony, carrying 2 cups of the warm human drink he often shared with her. He handed one to her with a smile. "You look thoughtful," he said. "I was remembering," she replied softly. "How easily I could have stayed silent forever. How one hand changed everything." Daniel leaned on the balcony rail, gazing at the city lights. Sometimes it takes only one person to see the truth. I saw you because you were worth seeing. The rest of them only needed time to understand. Mira lowered her eyes, touched by his words. And if you had not reached out, I might never have found the courage. He looked at her, his voice quiet but firm. Then I'm glad I did. For a long moment, silence rested between them, but it was not the heavy silence of loneliness. It was the gentle silence of trust. The next day, a grand assembly was called in the main square of the capital. Citizens, guards, and visiting delegates filled the wide space, eager to see the princess who had become the voice of calm in chaos. Mira stood on the raised platform, her crown shining in the sun. She felt the weight of thousands of eyes, but for the first time she did not tremble. She spoke clearly, her voice carried by the winds. For many years I was unseen. I believed my silence made me weak. But I have learned that even a quiet voice can hold strength when it is honest. I did not save this council alone. I was not brave alone. I was reminded by a friend that every voice can matter. And now I wish to remind all of you, whether you are great or small, loud or quiet, do not let your voice be lost. The galaxy is wide, but each one of us carries a light. The crowd was silent, listening. Then applause rose, strong and steady, echoing through the square. Mira bowed her head, her heart steady with pride, not in herself alone, but in the truth of her words. Daniel stood nearby, watching her. He felt the pride of knowing he had played a part, but he also knew this moment was hers. She had found her place, and no one could take it away. When the assembly ended, Mira stepped down from the platform. Daniel moved closer, and as the crowd parted around them, she reached out her hand. This time she did not hesitate, and this time she did not fear who might see. Her fingers slid into his, and she held his hand firmly, openly, in front of her people and the galaxy. Gasps rose from some, murmurs from others, but Mira did not let go. She spoke quietly to him so only he could hear. The galaxy may see me now, but you saw me first. For that I will always be grateful. Daniel smiled, his grip steady, and I will always stand beside you. Together they walked through the square, hand in hand. The shy princess was shy no longer. She had become a leader, a voice, and a light. And by her side walked a human, not of royal blood, not of noble house, but of steady heart. The galaxy learned that day that humans carried more than ships and machines. They carried kindness, the power to see worth where others saw nothing, and sometimes that was the greatest power of all.